For 3 long years, I had perfected the art of deception. I was Eleanor, the grieving widow, a struggling retiree living on a modest pension, a woman whose best days were clearly behind her. This persona was my carefully constructed armor, my invisible cloak, allowing me to observe my son, Daniel, and his wife, Serena, from the shadows of their own lives. My true identity, a woman of considerable wealth, remained hidden. A secret buried beneath faded cardigans and a perpetually tired expression. The charade was exhausting, a constant performance, but it was necessary. I needed to see them. Truly see them. Without the distorting lens of my fortune. I needed to understand what kind of people they had become. The phone call came on a Tuesday. Daniel's voice strained, an uncomfortable tightness in his tone that spoke volumes before he uttered a single word. "Mom," he began, "Serena and we'd like you to come for dinner this Saturday." His voice trailed off, and I could almost hear Serena's silent presence in the background, a palpable pressure guiding his words. It wasn't an invitation born of genuine warmth or affection, but rather a grudging obligation, a checkmark on a social calendar. Then came the subtle, yet cutting, instruction. "And Mom," he added, his voice dropping slightly, "maybe dress a little nicer? Serena just wants us all to be presentable." The word presentable hung in the air, a thinly veiled criticism of my usual attire, my widow's uniform. It stung, not because I cared for their judgment, but because it highlighted Serena's insidious influence over my son. He had once cherished me for who I was, not for how I appeared. I looked in the mirror that Saturday, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. My reflection showed a woman with a faded cardigan, her silver hair pulled back in a simple, practical bun. This was my uniform, the carefully crafted image of a dependent, somewhat dowdy widow. It served its purpose perfectly, a brilliant camouflage for the sharp mind and formidable will that lay beneath. The irony was a bitter pill. They believed I was scraping by, while in reality, I held the keys to their entire comfortable existence. My late husband had ensured my wealth was locked away, secure, and most importantly, secret. When I arrived at their house, a house I had secretly purchased for them 2 years prior, Daniel greeted me with a quick, almost perfunctory hug. It was a shallow embrace, a mere brush of bodies, devoid of any genuine warmth. His eyes darted past me, avoiding contact, a clear sign of his discomfort. The house, pristine and filled with furniture I had helped them select years ago, felt alien under their ownership. A beautiful cage I had unwittingly provided. Serena emerged from the living room, a vision in impeccable evening wear, her hair perfectly coiffed, her jewelry sparkling under the soft light. Her greeting was a tight, almost brittle smile, her eyes performing a swift, disdainful assessment of my appearance. I saw the barely concealed disgust, the slight curl of her lip. To her, I was a walking embarrassment, a stain on her polished life. I met her gaze with an unreadable calm, allowing her disdain to wash over me, adding another tick mark to my mental ledger. At the dinner table, the subtle slights continued. 2 places were set with their finest china, gleaming silverware, and crystal glasses. My place, however, was adorned with an older, slightly chipped plate, a different, less ornate fork, and a standard glass tumbler. It was a deliberate, quiet declaration of my perceived status, a clear message that I was separate, lesser. I felt a pang, not of hurt, but of confirmation. Every small detail was a piece of the puzzle I was diligently assembling. Serena proudly presented her famous lasagna. My expectations were low, and they were met. It was bland, greasy, and utterly unremarkable. Yet, I offered polite praise, murmuring about its richness and comforting flavor, playing the part of the appreciative, simple-minded guest. The charade demanded unwavering commitment. Throughout the meal, Serena dominated the conversation, her voice a relentless torrent of self-aggrandizement. She rattled off a litany of lavish purchases, designer bags, expensive trips, the new luxury car Daniel had recently acquired. She detailed her redecorating plans for the house, oblivious to the fact that I had helped them choose the existing pieces. that my funds had indirectly paid for the very walls she now wished to tear down. My inner rage simmered, a slow-burning fire beneath my calm exterior. Then came the direct insult. Serena gestured vaguely towards the living room, dismissing the furniture, the very pieces I had carefully helped them select years ago, as utterly outdated. She declared her intention to replace it all with something more modern, something with actual taste. Her words were a direct affront to my judgment, my assistance, and my invisible generosity. Daniel, as always, remained silent, his head bowed, meticulously cutting his lasagna, unable or unwilling to meet my gaze. Finally, the moment arrived, delivered with a saccharine smile and feigned concern. "Eleanor," Serena began, leaning forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're only 64. You really should consider getting a job. Even something simple, like at Walmart. It would give you a sense of purpose, you know, a little self-respect." My blood ran cold. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated disrespect. Me, Eleanor Vance, whose personal net worth could buy out several Walmarts, being told by this woman to seek self-respect stocking shelves. For a fleeting second, the carefully constructed facade threatened to shatter. But then, a cold, dangerous calm settled over me. This was it. This was the final piece of evidence I needed. Her true character, laid bare, ugly, and avaricious. I looked at her, then at Daniel, who remained silently fixated on his plate, his cowardice a deeper wound than Serena's cruel words. My smile, thin and unreadable, remained fixed. I waited until the end of the meal, just as Serena was launching into another monologue about her next expensive purchase. I cut her off, my voice quiet, deliberate, yet carrying a chilling edge. "Serena," I said, her name a subtle warning, "you have no idea what's coming for you." Her smug smile faltered, a flicker of unease entering her eyes. A small victory, a taste of what was to come. As I stood at the door, preparing to leave, Daniel offering another quick, distant goodbye, I turned back to Serena. My eyes held hers, a silent promise in their depths. "Oh, and Serena?" I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You might want to start updating your own resume." Her jaw dropped, her perfectly composed face finally crumbling into shock and confusion. Daniel, for the first time, looked up, his eyes wide with a question he dared not ask. The game, I decided, had officially begun. 3 days after that humiliating dinner, Daniel called. His voice was wary, a tight thread of apprehension woven through his tone. "Mom," he started, hesitantly. "Can we talk? Really talk?" To my surprise, he readily agreed to my suggestion of coming over to my apartment. He probably assumed it was easier than facing Serena's questions about his sudden visit to his depressed mother. I smiled to myself. He was walking right into my carefully laid trap. I prepared my small apartment, ensuring every detail reinforced the facade of a struggling retiree. The worn armchair, the stack of library books on the coffee table, the modest teapot. Hidden away in the back of my cupboard, however, was the expensive coffee I usually drank, ready to be brewed for myself after he left. The apartment was deliberately modest, chosen precisely for its ability to convey a sense of quiet, dignified poverty. It was a stage, and I was the lead actress. When Daniel arrived, his eyes scanned the room, lingering on the faded curtains and the somewhat threadbare rug. I saw the pity bloom in his eyes, a soft, almost imperceptible shift in his expression. It was exactly what I wanted him to see, what he expected to see. It solidified my persona, making the coming revelation all the more impactful. "It's cozy, Mom," he said, his voice a little too gentle, a little too strained. He pulled up the wooden chair I offered, sitting uncomfortably on its hard surface. He didn't waste time, though. "Mom," he began, his brow furrowed. "At dinner the other night, what was that all about? I mean, you were different, and what you said to Serena at the door. I don't understand. Something's going on." His gaze, usually so evasive, held mine, a flicker of genuine concern mixed with suspicion. I met his gaze steadily. "Daniel," I began, my voice soft but firm. "Your father, Arthur, always had a saying. He used to tell me that some people mistake kindness for weakness. They see generosity as an invitation to exploit, and a soft heart as an opportunity to tread all over it." I paused, letting his father's words hang in the air. A ghost of wisdom in the quiet room. He always warned me to be careful who I showed my true self to. I watched as Daniel shifted, a ripple of unease crossing his face. I continued, my voice gaining a quiet intensity. "For 3 years, Daniel, I have watched Serena treat me like a burden. An embarrassment. An inconvenience, from the way she would forget to tell me about family gatherings, to the thinly veiled insults about my clothes, my home, my very existence. She made it clear, in every subtle and not so subtle way, that she found me a nuisance, a shadow she wished to erase from your life." I detailed the quiet snubs, the dismissive gestures, the way she would cut me off mid-sentence, the eye rolls, the constant subtle suggestions that I was too old, too slow, too irrelevant. Daniel squirmed, his gaze darting around the room, unable to meet mine. "Mom, Serena, she doesn't mean to be cold," he mumbled, his defense weak, almost pathetic. She's very direct. She's focused on her career." "On us," I scoffed softly. "Direct, or simply cruel?" "Daniel, when was the last time Serena treated me like a person, a mother, a part of your family, and not just some obligation you had to endure?" My question hung in the air, an unspoken challenge. He had no answer because there was none. Serena had perfected the art of subtle cruelty, and Daniel, in his spinelessness, had allowed it. He had chosen her comfort over my dignity. "Some people," I continued, leaning forward slightly, my voice now steel, "are about to learn that actions have consequences. Serious ones." With that, I rose and walked over to my desk, retrieving a thick manila folder I had deliberately placed there earlier. I returned to the table, the weight of the folder feeling significant in my hands. I laid it on the worn surface between us. "Daniel," I said, my voice hushed, "your father left me everything, not just a modest pension, as I've let you believe. He left me substantial assets." I opened the folder, pushing it across the table for him to see. Inside were bank statements, investment portfolios, deeds to properties he didn't even know existed. His eyes widened, scanning the figures, his mouth agape. The bottom line of one statement showed a figure followed by many zeros. $5 million, I stated flatly, watching his reaction. "That's what your father made sure I had, and that's just a portion of it." Daniel stared at the documents, then at me, his face pale with shock. $5 million. "Mom? But you've been living here. You've been pretending." His voice was barely a whisper. A realization dawning in his eyes. A horrifying understanding. "You've been testing us?" I nodded slowly, my gaze unwavering. "Yes, Daniel, I was. After your father passed, I saw how quickly things changed, how people's true colors came out. I needed to protect myself, to protect Arthur's legacy. From people like your wife, Daniel. I needed to know if the son I raised, the one Arthur loved so fiercely, was still inside you. I needed to see if you would stand up for me, your own mother, when I was at my most vulnerable. And you didn't." The last words were a quiet accusation, a statement of undeniable fact. I pushed another document across the table. It was an old letter, from Arthur to a powerful friend, a man who headed a major marketing firm. "And this," I said, "is how you got that amazing marketing position you're so proud of. The one you told me you landed all on your own. Your father pulled strings. Daniel, he set you up for success. He wanted you to have every advantage." The color drained completely from his face. His entire world, built on what he thought was his own merit, was crumbling before his eyes. I watched him absorb the blows, one after another. He looked lost, adrift. "Some storms are coming, sweetheart," I warned, my voice losing its softness. hardening with determination. And they're going to hit hard. When they do, you'll have to decide which side of them you want to be on. You'll have to decide who you are, Daniel, and what truly matters to you. The call came a week later, as expected. Serena's voice was sharp, cutting through the receiver like broken glass. "Eleanor," she began, dispensing with any pretense of politeness, "I demand to know what kind of sick game you're playing. What's this nonsense about millions of dollars?" Daniel came home looking like he'd seen a ghost. "You need to explain yourself, now." Her tone was a potent mix of fury and thinly veiled greed, a sound that brought a slow, satisfying smile to my lips. "A sick game, Serena?" I responded, my voice calm, almost serene. "Is that what you call it? I thought I was simply accepting your generous invitations to dinner, enduring your helpful suggestions about my future employment at Walmart, and politely eating off the mismatched plates you so thoughtfully provided." I could almost hear her sputtering on the other end, her carefully constructed composure cracking under the weight of my words. The call ended abruptly, a slammed phone indicating her rage. Later that afternoon, as I prepared for their inevitable visit, I shed my costume. The faded cardigan and simple bun were replaced by an elegant black silk dress that flowed gracefully, a subtle string of pearls, and diamond earrings that caught the light. My silver hair, freed from its practical constraints, fell softly around my face. The woman in the mirror was no longer the downtrodden widow. She was Eleanor Vance, the woman Arthur had loved. A woman of substance and quiet power. When Daniel and Serena arrived, Daniel's eyes widened in undisguised shock. He stood frozen in the doorway for a moment, his gaze sweeping over my transformation. "Mom?" he whispered, a tremor in his voice. You look like your old self, like when Dad was alive." It was the most genuine thing he'd said in years, a faint echo of the son I once knew. Serena, on the other hand, had clearly dressed for battle. She wore an expensive designer dress, meticulously styled hair, and a full face of defiant makeup. But next to my quiet confidence, her opulent display seemed forced, almost desperate, like a child playing dress-up in clothes too grand for them. Her eyes, however, were venomous, fixed on me with an intensity that promised a fight. She marched into the living room, taking a stance that was almost prosecutorial. "All right, Eleanor," she snapped, arms crossed, her voice tight with indignation. "Let's cut the theatrics. Daniel told me you have millions. I want the whole truth, every single detail. How much money do you actually have, and why have you been lying all this time?" I gestured to the sofa, inviting them to sit, but Serena remained standing, rigid. Daniel, however, sank onto the cushions, his face a mix of dread and morbid curiosity. "I wasn't lying, Serena," I corrected gently. "I was observing. After Arthur died, I realized that true friends and family reveal themselves not in prosperity, but in perceived adversity. I simply wanted to see who my real friends were, and who truly cared for me, not for my perceived status or potential inheritance." Serena scoffed. "And what does that have to do with anything? You wanted to test us? To make us feel bad? It has everything to do with it," I replied, my voice losing its gentle edge. "Because while I was testing you, I learned some rather enlightening things. For instance, do you remember Mrs. Davies? My neighbor? The sweet woman who always baked cookies for me?" Serena nodded, a faint frown on her face. "Well, Serena, you told Mrs. Davies that I was becoming senile, that I was forgetting things, losing my grip on reality." Daniel gasped, his head snapping towards Serena, her face paled slightly. "And then there's Mr. Jenkins, from the community center," I continued, pressing on. "You suggested to him that I might need a care facility, that I was no longer capable of living independently." Daniel turned fully to Serena, his voice barely a whisper, thick with disbelief. "Serena, is that true?" Serena's eyes darted from me to Daniel, a flicker of panic in their depths. "No, Daniel, of course not. She's making it up. She's trying to turn you against me." "Am I?" I questioned, a chilling calm in my voice. "Or was it all part of a larger plan? A plan to have me declared incompetent, to gain guardianship, to access Arthur's supposed life insurance, which you believed was my only asset. My words hung in the air, a devastating accusation. I reached for my elegant leather handbag, pulling out a set of documents. These, I stated, placing them on the coffee table, are records of your consultations with an elder law attorney. You inquired about the process for obtaining guardianship over a supposedly incapacitated relative. You also specifically asked about liquidating assets once guardianship was established. Daniel picked up the papers, his hands trembling as he read them. His eyes, fixed on Serena, were wide with horror, a look of utter betrayal etched across his face. "Serena," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't do this." Serena's defiance crumbled, replaced by a desperate, trapped anger. "She's twisting things, Daniel. She's lying. Am I?" I repeated, leaning forward, my voice a quiet, deadly whisper. "Or is it simply that you never loved Daniel, Serena?" "Not really. You loved what he could provide, the lifestyle, the security, and when his salary, even with Arthur's silent help, wasn't enough to satisfy your endless desires, you started looking for other income sources, for ways to get your hands on my pension, as you called it." I then produced another document, a printout from a credit reporting agency. "Shall we discuss this, Serena? Your secret credit card debt, the $43,000 you've accumulated, financed by cash advances, hidden from Daniel?" I watched her face drain of all color. "Or perhaps the various pieces of jewelry you've pawned over the last year. All to fund your lavish lifestyle you flaunted to your friends, while publicly bemoaning my supposed financial burden?" Serena let out a choked cry, her face contorting in pure rage. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not of remorse, but of fury. "You set me up," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You deliberately did this to ruin me, to destroy my marriage." Her carefully constructed world, built on deceit and greed, was imploding around her. "No, Serena," I stated, my voice cutting through her tear-streaked rage with the sharpness of a diamond. "I didn't destroy your marriage. You did, the moment you looked at Daniel, not as a husband you loved, but as a stepping stone, a means to an end, a wallet, a resource to exploit." I stood up, retrieving another document from my elegant bag, this one slightly larger, crisp, and official. "And since we're talking about what's mine, and what's yours, let's clarify something else." I unfolded the document and laid it flat on the coffee table, directly in front of Serena. It was the deed to the house they currently occupied, the one she so eagerly planned to redecorate, the one she had proudly called ours. My name was clearly listed as the sole owner. "This house," I declared, my voice resonating with an authority that left no room for doubt, "has been legally mine for the past 7 years. You and Daniel have merely been my very long-term guests." Serena's eyes darted from the deed to my face, her jaw slack. The indignation and fury that had fueled her collapse into tears now transformed into stark, incredulous shock. Daniel, who had been silently absorbing every word, stared at the document, a fresh wave of disbelief washing over him. The ground beneath his feet, the very foundation of his life, was not only shifting but crumbling entirely. "I am giving you precisely 30 minutes, Serena," I continued, my gaze unwavering, "to pack a bag with your absolute essentials and vacate my property. If you are still here after that time, I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing." There was no negotiation in my tone, no hint of a threat. It was a simple, unassailable statement of fact. Daniel finally stirred, his eyes, previously filled with horror, now hardened with a sudden, decisive clarity. He looked at Serena, a flicker of disgust replacing the lingering affection. "Get out," he said, his voice low and firm, a voice I hadn't heard from him in years. "Get out of my mother's house." It was the verdict Serena had earned, delivered by the man she had so carelessly undervalued. Serena let out a guttural cry, snatching her designer bag and storming towards the door, her high heels clicking a furious rhythm on the polished wood floor. She paused at the threshold, turning back to glare at me, her face a mask of distorted rage. "This isn't over, Eleanor," she shrieked, her voice hoarse with venom. "You haven't seen the last of me. I merely raised an eyebrow, a faint, sardonic smile playing on my lips. "Oh, I know, sweetheart," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. "This, in fact, is just the beginning of what happens to people who mistake my kindness for weakness." She slammed the door, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent house. Daniel and I were left in the aftermath, the air thick with unspoken truths and the weight of 7 years of deception now exposed. The next morning, the fallout began in earnest. My phone rang relentlessly, a symphony of indignation. First was Vivian, my late husband's cousin. Her voice sharp with condemnation. "Eleanor, what on earth have you done, throwing Serena out like that? She's distraught, crying her eyes out. How could you be so cruel?" She had clearly swallowed Serena's victim narrative whole. I calmly asked if Serena had mentioned her consultation with an elder law attorney or the $43,000 in secret credit card debt. A stunned silence followed, and I gently, but firmly, hung up. Minutes later, Brenda, another extended family member, called, echoing Vivian's outrage. "We always knew you were a bit eccentric, Eleanor, but this is beyond the pale." Driving a wedge between Daniel and his wife, forcing her onto the streets, I repeated my pointed questions about the attorney and the debt. This time, Brenda started to stammer, and I again, without another word, ended the call. Then came Mark, my nephew, a slick lawyer whom I had helped considerably through Northwestern. His voice was smooth, subtly laced with professional concern, but underlying it was a clear attempt to subtly manipulate. "Aunt Eleanor," he began, his tone dripping with faux sympathy, "I'm hearing some very disturbing things from Serena. The family is concerned about your cognitive decline. Are you perhaps feeling a little overwhelmed? Maybe forgetting things?" I allowed a brief, chilling silence to stretch. "Cognitive decline, Mark?" I responded, my voice sharper than he expected. "Is that what Serena's calling it? Perhaps my memory is sharper than you, or she, gives me credit for. For instance, I distinctly remember writing a check for $32,000 for your final year at Northwestern. I also recall the significant contribution I made to your sister's lavish wedding, and the substantial sum I personally covered for your mother's cancer treatment when insurance fell short. Does that sound like a woman with a cognitive decline to you?" Mark stammered, his smooth facade crumbling. I hung up before he could formulate another excuse. It became abundantly clear that Serena had wasted no time. She had launched a full-blown smear campaign, painting herself as the innocent victim of an unstable older woman, a manipulative matriarch suddenly turning vicious. She was a master of self-pity, and unfortunately, many were buying into her story. 2 days later, Daniel called, his voice distraught, almost broken. He asked to meet me at a neutral cafe, away from the prying eyes and judgmental ears of our family. He looked utterly drained, his eyes bloodshot, a hollow weariness etched onto his face. "Mom," he began, his voice hoarse. "Serena," she called my boss. "She told him you have dementia, that you're unstable, and that I'm dealing with a family crisis. She implied I'm under immense stress and might be unreliable at work." His hands ran through his hair in frustration. My boss called me into his office. "Mom, my work is being affected. She's trying to sabotage my career." My heart ached for my son, but my resolve remained firm. "Why did she do that?" "Daniel," I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because she's furious," he admitted, his head bowed. "She's furious at being exposed, at losing the house, and she wants to hurt me. She wants to make me look foolish or unfaithful. I can't explain her lies without implicating myself, without looking completely naive for not seeing it sooner. I'm cornered. Mom," he went on to explain Serena's current living situation. She was staying with her sister, crying to anyone who would listen, twisting the narrative until I was the villain, a manipulative, dangerous woman who had turned on her own family. She had perfected the role of the wronged woman. And, Daniel added, his voice dropping to a whisper, "She's already seen a lawyer. She's claiming tenant rights for the house. My lawyer says her case is baseless. Obviously, we have all the documents, but her goal isn't to win, Mom. Her goal is to make our lives hell. She wants to drag this out, cause as much public humiliation and expense as possible. I knew this. I expected nothing less from Serena. The storm, as I had predicted, had officially arrived. If you're still with me, you know this story is far from over. To witness how Eleanor masterfully turns the tables and delivers justice, hit that like button, share this with someone who appreciates a good drama, and subscribe so you don't miss a single twist in this unfolding saga. The cafe hummed with a low murmur of conversations, but Daniel's voice cut through the ambient noise, thick with a mix of despair and growing anger. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through Serena's social media profiles. "Look at this, Mom," he whispered, holding the screen toward me. Serena's posts were a masterclass in calculated victimhood, vague, emotionally charged statements about unimaginable pain, betrayal within the family, and the heartbreak of shattered trust filled her feed. There were soft focus selfies, her eyes wide and mournful, accompanied by captions hinting at deep emotional suffering without ever actually accusing me directly. It was designed for maximum sympathy and plausible deniability, painting her as a fragile, wronged woman. I studied the posts for a moment, my expression unreadable. "It's clever. I'll give her that," I conceded, handing the phone back. "She's playing the long game, subtly poisoning the well against me, without risking outright slander she can be sued for." Then, I pointed out the glaring omission. "But did you notice, Daniel, in all her posts, all her mournful reflections, all her talk of heartbreak and broken trust, she never once mentions loving you. She never mentions missing her husband. It's all about her pain, her suffering, her victimhood, never about genuine loss." Daniel looked at the phone again, a dawning realization in his eyes. He scrolled through her recent history, a grim confirmation settling over his features. "You're right," he murmured. "It's all about her." "Exactly," I affirmed. "This isn't grief, Daniel. This is rage. Rage at being caught. Rage at having her carefully constructed world of lies exposed. Her bitterness is blinding her, and it will lead her to make mistakes." I took a sip of my tea, feeling a dangerous calm settle over me. "Let her keep digging, sweetheart. She'll become careless. She'll overreach." I then produced another thick manila envelope from my bag, identical to the one I'd shown him before, but thicker. "This, Daniel," I said, placing it on the table, "is my insurance. Inside are detailed documentations of every financial indiscretion, every lie, every manipulation Serena has committed that I've been able to trace. Credit card statements with hidden accounts, pawnshop receipts for jewelry she claimed were lost, even records of conversations she had with various people, where she subtly maligned me. My years of observation, my meticulous record-keeping, were about to pay off. Serena is desperate now," I continued. "She's lost the house. Her victim narrative is being questioned by some, and her attempts to destabilize your job are not going unnoticed. She will try to land one final, devastating blow. And that, Daniel, will be her fatal mistake." A week later, my prediction came to pass. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number, and a calm, professional voice introduced herself as Detective Laura Ramirez from the Sacramento Police Department. "Mrs. Vance," she stated, "we have received a police report filed against you. I'm calling to inform you of the allegations." My pulse quickened, but my voice remained steady. "What are the allegations, Detective?" "The report alleges elder abuse and financial exploitation," Detective Ramirez replied, "filed by a Serena Vance." A small, knowing smile touched my lips. "I see. And when would you like me to come in to discuss this, Detective?" "As soon as possible, Mrs. Vance," she responded. "Would tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock work for you?" "Perfectly," I confirmed. As soon as I hung up, I made another call. "Marcus," I said, my voice crisp and authoritative, "to my longtime attorney, Marcus Thorne. It's time. I'll need you to meet me at the Sacramento Police Department tomorrow morning at 10. He knew exactly what I meant. The next morning, I drove my black BMW to the police station, feeling a sense of quiet triumph. I was no longer wearing the widow's uniform. Today, I was dressed as Eleanor Vance, the successful professional, the sharp, intelligent woman who had built an empire with her late husband. My tailored navy suit, silk blouse, and impeccably styled hair spoke of confidence and capability, not vulnerability. The disguise was officially shed, never to be worn again. Detective Ramirez, a sharp-eyed woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, looked up as I entered the interview room, followed by Marcus Thorne. Her expression, initially composed, shifted to one of visible surprise. She clearly hadn't expected the woman who walked in to match the pathetic, senile image Serena had painted. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice betraying a hint of confusion. "You're not quite what I expected based on the report." I offered her a polite, unruffled smile. "I imagine not. Detective, my daughter-in-law has a vivid imagination." Detective Ramirez cleared her throat, clearly readjusting her approach. She began to summarize Serena's claims, reading from her notes. "Miss Vance alleges that you are a vulnerable elderly woman, suffering from increasing cognitive decline, and that you have been financially exploited by both her and your son, Daniel. She claims that you are being manipulated, forced out of your home, and that your assets are being secretly siphoned away by them." The irony was almost comical. "She provided several pieces of evidence," the detective continued, pushing a folder across the table. Inside were grainy photos of my modest apartment, pictures of me in my faded cardigan, and copies of my deliberately low bank statements. She states she obtained these during what she called welfare checks, expressing concern for your well-being. "Welfare checks," I interjected, my voice cool, or, as I would call it, stalking and invasion of privacy, meticulously documented by your son's wife. Marcus Thorne leaned forward, placing a thick, official-looking binder on the table. "Detective Ramirez," he stated, his voice calm and professional. "My client, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, has a slightly different version of events, and the documents to back it up." He opened the binder to the first tab, pushing it towards her. It was my real bank statement, showing assets not of a few $1,000s, but of approximately $5 million. He then laid out my investment portfolio, property deeds, and a detailed accounting of my financial independence. "As you can see, Detective," I explained, my voice steady, "I am far from vulnerable or financially exploited. For the past 3 years, I chose to live modestly, to observe my son and his wife without the influence of my true wealth. This was a deliberate choice, made to ascertain their genuine characters and intentions." Marcus then meticulously laid out Serena's pattern of manipulation, her attempts to gain guardianship, her hidden debts, and the smear campaign she had launched. The truth, in all its devastating detail, was finally unfolding, painting a picture not of elder abuse, but of attempted financial exploitation by Serena herself. The interview room crackled with a palpable tension. Detective Ramirez, her initial surprise replaced by a focused intensity, listened intently as I, with Marcus Thorne's assistance, laid out the full extent of Serena's insidious scheme. I provided the detective with the printouts of Serena's calls to the elder law attorney, detailing her inquiries about guardianship and how to access a relative's assets. Each page was a damning piece of evidence, outlining her calculated steps to seize control of my supposed estate. Then came the financial records. "Here, Detective," I stated, pushing across a stack of meticulously organized documents, "are the records of Serena Vance's hidden credit card debt, over $40,000, accrued over the past 2 years. At the very same time, she was relentlessly pressuring my son, Daniel, to talk to his mother about contributing more financially, about selling certain assets." The correlation was undeniable, painting a clear picture of Serena's financial desperation, fueling her manipulative actions. But the most damning evidence came next. I presented screenshots of Serena's search history, dating back over a year. There were searches for elder abuse definitions, conservatorship laws, California, how to prove mental incompetence of a parent, and signs of dementia in elderly. These searches were conducted weeks, sometimes days, before Serena began subtly spreading rumors to our family and friends about my supposed declining mental state. It proved her malice, her premeditation, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Detective Ramirez reviewed the evidence, her expression growing increasingly grim. "Mrs. Vance, she finally said, looking up, her voice firm. Based on the evidence you've provided, it's clear that Serena Vance has not only filed a false police report, a serious crime in itself, but also engaged in a concerted effort to defraud you through manipulation and misrepresentation. This goes far beyond a simple domestic dispute. Marcus Thorne then stepped forward, his voice a gravelly rumble. Detective, my client demands full prosecution against Serena Vance for filing a false police report, attempted fraud, and stalking. Furthermore, we will be seeking a comprehensive restraining order against her, preventing any further contact with Mrs. Vance or her son. The detective nodded. Understood, Mr. Thorne. Given the nature and depth of this evidence, I believe we have more than enough to proceed. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Daniel, his voice a mix of shock and utter bewilderment. Mom, he gasped. Serena's been arrested. The police came right to her sister's house. What happened? Justice happened, Daniel, I replied calmly. She filed a false police report against me, claiming elder abuse and financial exploitation. I simply provided the police with the truth and the evidence of her own manipulative schemes. Then, his voice grew even more confused. But Mom, I went to your apartment just to process things, and it's completely empty. A soft smile touched my lips. That, sweetheart, was just another part of the deception. The small apartment, the modest life, that was just another costume I wore. It's time for you to see my real home. Come to Meridian Towers, penthouse suite. Within 20 minutes, Daniel arrived, his face a mask of awe and disbelief as he stepped out of the private elevator directly into my opulent penthouse. The expansive living space, with its floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of the city skyline, the modern art adorning the walls, the designer furniture. It was a world away from the cramped, depressing apartment he'd visited just days before. He looked around, overwhelmed, his gaze sweeping from the sleek kitchen to the panoramic vista, then back to me, utterly speechless. The apartment was just another costume, Daniel, I reiterated, watching his reaction. A prop in the play I had to stage to find out who was truly in my corner. I guided him to a comfortable sofa, pouring him a glass of water. Serena wasn't just greedy, Daniel. She was genuinely malicious. Her goal wasn't just money. It was to destroy us both, to humiliate me, and to completely isolate you. I sat opposite him, my voice steady, laying out Serena's likely fate. She'll be prosecuted for filing a false police report, attempted fraud, and stalking. That means jail time, Daniel, and a permanent criminal record. She'll also face civil lawsuits for defamation and emotional distress. The gravity of the situation slowly dawned on him, erasing any lingering hope he might have had for reconciliation. Daniel buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking slightly. Mom, he choked out, his voice raw with emotion. I feel like I don't know anything about my own life. Everything I thought was real, everything I believed. It was all a lie. I reached out, placing a comforting hand on his arm. It wasn't all a lie, sweetheart. You are still my son. Your father loved you, the good in you, the kindness you have. That's real. This is a chance, Daniel. A difficult, painful chance. But a chance nonetheless. A second chance to build something real, something honest, without the corrosive influence of someone who never truly cared for you. I looked at him, my heart aching with a mixture of regret and fierce maternal love. And yes, I admitted, my voice softening, what I did was a test. And perhaps it was unfair. A mother shouldn't have to test her child's love. But after your father died, the world changed. And I had to protect myself and his legacy from those who would exploit it, including, it turned out, your own wife. Daniel looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed but clear, seeing me not as the fragile widow, nor the avenging matriarch, but simply as his mother. He took a deep breath, the weight of years of silent complicity and recent revelations etched onto his face. Mom, he began, his voice barely a whisper. Can we start over? Really start over? A wave of profound relief washed over me. This was the son I remembered, the one buried beneath layers of Serena's influence and his own fear. "Oh, Daniel," I said, my voice thick with emotion, more than anything. I reached across the coffee table, taking his hands in mine. "No more tests, sweetheart. No more games, no more lies, just us. Honest." I then offered a small, knowing smile. "Though I will warn you," I added, a playful glint in my eye. "If you ever bring home another Serena, I'm packing my bags and moving to Europe." Without a forwarding address, Daniel stared at me for a moment. Then, to my profound delight, a genuine laugh burst forth from him, echoing through the penthouse. It was the first time I'd heard him laugh, truly laugh. In months, perhaps even years, it was a sound of release, of healing, and it felt like sunshine after a long storm. It was all the affirmation I needed. Our deal was sealed. 6 months later, life had found a new rhythm. The initial shockwaves had subsided, the gossip had faded into the background, and a quiet sense of peace had settled over us. One sunny afternoon, Daniel called, his voice lighter than I'd ever heard it. "Mom," he announced, a jubilant note in his tone. "It's final. The divorce is officially final." I felt a surge of warmth. "That's wonderful news, darling. How are you feeling?" "Free," he replied instantly, the word infused with a profound sense of liberation. "Terrified, but free. Like I've been holding my breath for years and can finally exhale." I understood that sentiment perfectly. The burden of a toxic relationship, the weight of constant vigilance. It was an invisible prison. And now, he was truly out. Serena, true to my prediction, had faced the consequences. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail for filing a false police report and attempted fraud. Following her release, she would serve 3 years of probation, be required to pay restitution for my legal costs, and was slapped with a 2-year restraining order, ensuring she couldn't come near us. Her carefully cultivated life of luxury and manipulation had crumbled, leaving her with a criminal record and a bleak future. Later that week, Daniel came over for dinner, and as we sat on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle below, he looked at me, a lingering question in his eyes. "Mom," he asked softly, "when did you know? When did you know she was going to try something like this?" I sighed, a faint memory stirring. "It was the 2nd week after your father's funeral, Daniel. I was still drowning in grief, barely functional, and Serena, she spent 45 minutes, not comforting me, not talking about Arthur, but asking about his life insurance, his investments, whether I had access to his bank accounts. She was incredibly persistent, almost aggressive, about the specifics of my financial situation." He looked surprised. "I don't remember that," he admitted. "You were deep in your own grief, sweetheart," I said gently. "But I remember it with stark clarity. She wasn't grieving, Daniel. She was calculating. That's when I decided. That's when I knew I had to find out who she truly was, and what she was truly capable of. And that's when I decided to put on my costume and conduct my little experiment." A profound sadness settled over his features. "All this, just because of that?" "Not just because of that, Daniel," I corrected, my voice serious. "I did it, not just to expose her, but to save you from a life with someone who would have bled you dry, financially and emotionally. Someone who would have ultimately destroyed the good, kind man your father and I raised." He was quiet for a long moment, absorbing my words. Then, a tentative smile touched his lips. "Well," he began, a hint of blush creeping up his neck. "Speaking of second chances, I've actually been seeing someone." My heart gave a little flutter of hope. "Oh? Tell me about her." "Her name is Clara," he said, his smile widening. "She's a teacher. 3rd grade. She's normal, Mom. Really normal. And kind. She volunteers at an animal shelter on weekends, drives an old Honda Civic with a dent in the bumper, thinks going to Olive Garden is a fancy night out." He laughed softly. A genuine, happy sound. "She has no idea about any of this." "Any of what, sweetheart?" I probed gently. The money, he clarified. She thinks I inherited the house from my grandmother, who passed away some years ago. She doesn't know about, you know, the 5 million. His eyes held a flicker of apprehension. I'm scared. Mom. Scared of making the same mistake again. Scared of not being able to tell the difference between someone who genuinely cares for me and someone who's just looking for an angle. I squeezed his hand. You've learned a lot, Daniel. More than you know. And this time, you have me, and I have you. We'll navigate it together. The city lights glimmered below us, a silent testament to the vastness of the world and the small, intimate space we occupied in it. Daniel's fear of repeating past mistakes hung heavy in the air, and I knew it was a fear I had to help him overcome. Your father, I began, my voice soft. Arthur had a very simple way of defining love and how to spot its opposite. He always said, love makes you feel like the best version of yourself. It lifts you up, encourages your growth, and celebrates your strengths. Manipulation, on the other hand, makes you feel like you're never good enough. It chips away at your confidence, makes you doubt your worth, and controls you through insecurity. Daniel considered my words, his gaze distant. Then a faint smile touched his lips. Clara, he mused. She makes me feel like I'm enough, just as I am, like I don't have to pretend or perform. It's how I used to feel. Before Serena, then you have your answer, sweetheart, I said, a wave of warmth washing over me. Trust that feeling, Daniel. Trust yourself. You're wiser now. You've seen the depths of manipulation and the true meaning of genuine kindness. Your heart will guide you better this time. I'd really like to meet her, Daniel, I added, a genuine eagerness in my voice. The real me, from the beginning. No tests, no costumes. Just Eleanor. He looked slightly worried. What if she's intimidated by all this? He gestured vaguely at the opulent penthouse. And what if you don't like her? Mom? I chuckled softly. First, if she's intimidated by success and comfort, then perhaps she's not the right match for you. And second, my darling boy, I promise to keep my opinions to myself, unless you explicitly ask for them. But, I added, my gaze firm, if she doesn't like me for who I truly am, then she's definitely not the right woman for you. He leaned over and pulled me into a tight hug, a rare embrace of genuine affection. Thank you, Mom, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. For everything. For saving me. Even when I didn't know I needed saving, I held him close, reflecting on the past 3 grueling years. The pain of watching my son diminish under Serena's influence had been profound. Arthur, my straightforward, confrontational husband, would have handled it very differently. I knew. He would have confronted Serena head-on, demanded answers, and likely cut her off immediately. But Arthur had never had to wonder if people loved him for himself or for his money. He was a force of nature, successful from a young age, and always surrounded by those who genuinely admired him. That particular burden, the chilling uncertainty of true intentions, had fallen to me after his death. I had to know, for my own peace and for Daniel's future. The ringing of my phone broke the silence, and I saw it was a text from Vivian. Eleanor, it read. I just wanted to say how sorry I am for judging you. We all heard Serena's stories and believed her, without really questioning. We've all learned something important about making judgments without all the facts. Other texts and calls followed over the next few days. Brenda apologized. Mark called to offer any legal assistance you might need, free of charge, of course, and various cousins expressed their regret for jumping to conclusions. I accepted their apologies graciously, recognizing the courage it took for them to admit their error, but in the back of my mind, I made mental notes of who had been quick to condemn, who had truly listened, and who had stood by me. Some relationships, I knew, would never be quite the same, and that was a piece I was ready to embrace. Just as I was starting to feel a true sense of closure, another text came through. This one from Detective Ramirez. Mrs. Vance, it read, Serena Vance attempted to contact you from county jail. The restraining order was upheld, and the call was blocked. She has been reminded of the terms of her release. For the first time in 3 years, the news of Serena's persistent malice didn't send a shiver of anxiety through me. There was no fear, no worry about her next move. I had reclaimed my power, my voice, and my peace. She was a spent force, trapped by her own greed and lies. My focus now was on the future. I planned to sell the house Daniel and Serena had once lived in, the proceeds of which I would give to Daniel as a true, unburdened inheritance. A fresh start for him. As for me, the world was open. I looked forward to living authentically, traveling to places Arthur and I had always dreamed of, exploring new philanthropic ventures, and simply enjoying the pleasure of not hiding anymore. My journey had been long, painful, and at times, isolating. But it had brought me back to myself, stronger and more certain than ever before. And in Daniel, I saw the promise of a brighter, more honest future. A true second chance for us both.